And we're back. Welcome back to the channel. We got Ned back with us. What's going on, man? How are you?
Pretty good, man. How's it going, Radeon?
Pretty good, pretty good. So I've been thinking about this idea of good deals versus great deals that Zuber talks about all the time from the channel One Rental at a Time. So for anyone that doesn't know, essentially it means that you should only do great deals as opposed to good deals. And what is a great deal? Well, the way that Michael Zuber talks about it is that if you get the average of the returns for properties in your market,
Yeah.
the deals that you should be going for are a few percentage points above that average return, right? So an
Yeah.
average return would be a good deal, and a great deal would be a return that's a few percentage points above average, depending on what the average is. So if the average in your market is like 10%, then a great deal would be like 14, 15 and above, something like that,
Yeah.
right?
I kind of think about it like bell curves from math class, like the middle of the bell curve is the average market, and then you want to go a deviation over for good and then another deviation for great. So
Yeah.
there's less and less and less the further out you go.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So for me, I was lucky. Well, I guess I was lucky too, but I did do some work. For my first deal, my it was a great deal according to relative to my market, and the return is well over 20%, cash
Yeah.
on cash return we're talking about. So as a beginner, I think it's super important that you try to get that first deal and make it a great deal, right? Depending on what your market average is. And I did that with the first deal. And it just so happens that I also did it with the second deal as well, because the return is also above 20%. And the average in my market, it's I think it's around 10% or so, maybe a little more.
When you do
Now,
cash on
as
cash, do you do after PITI, property interest or principal interest, taxes and mortgage or taxes and insurance?
Yep. And on top of that, I also take out 15% for capital expenditures, so like roof and heating system and all that, maintenance and vacancy. So I just try to be a little bit conservative because maintenance is less than 5%. Capital expenditures, I guess that's
Yeah.
accurate. I guess that's 5%. And then vacancy in my state is like point something percent, but I still put five to the side. So try to be conservative there. And yeah, the
Interesting.
return comes out, excellent. So
Yeah, my market, and it's interesting because I feel like over time I've seen the underwriting other people do and their minimum requirements shift. So when I first started in 2015, I always just threw 25% on there as my removal number. So not
okay.
15%. For me it's 25. And so a lot of deals that I do now, I'm like, man, this is skinny, but I feel like values might have gone up a lot,
Mhm.
but the maintenance and a lot of those other expenses didn't go up as exponentially as the property prices.
I
So it's
understand.
interesting because it's like that
Mhm.
ratio seems to have changed a little bit.
Okay, so the way I do that, I
Yeah.
don't add 25% at the end. I add it with each of the transactions, right? For example, for taxes, I always round up to the nearest thousand. For
Okay.
insurance, I do the same. For rents, I keep them a little bit below average when I run the numbers. Plus, I add this 15%. So now the best way to see the actual return would be a year in retrospect, right? So after a
Oh
year,
yeah.
and then you can go back and look at your maintenance and capital expenditures and all of that, and it should be much higher than what me or you calculated for the return. So I don't really have that long yet, so I haven't really done a retrospect cash on
Yeah.
cash return, but it's by doing it this way that we are saying that the return in retrospect should be much higher than what you
Oh yeah.
initially calculated. So
If I hadn't done the 25%, a lot of these huge tax rates and I mean, for people that don't know, my property insurance across my portfolio tripled in one year and my cash flow stayed positive. If I hadn't done the 15 or 25%, I wouldn't have had that safety net built in to my gross revenue
Yeah.
to
Yep.
for my portfolio to still work. So a lot of this
Yep.
stuff's really important. And I think
Yep.
people skip that.
Yeah. So that's what we call a great deal, right? You have to make sure that at least your first one is a great deal. Now, my question for you would be, would you ever do a good deal after maybe you have you know, let's say 2 properties, 3 properties? You already have that, but for someone that's new, would you allow them or recommend that they do a good deal, meaning it's still a decent return, but it's just average?
Um, I have two answers.
Mhm.
The first one is it depends on how comfortable you are. So in a lot of cases, people I've talked to, great deals in a lot of cases are distressed, have a lot of work, they're more complicated. And so again, we go back to bell curve. On one end, they're super easy. On the other end, there's super difficult. And the yield and how much money you can make kind of increases the more complicated it gets because less and less people want to actually take on the challenge.
Yep.
But the problem is that further down that challenge you go, if you have a spouse, the harder it is if it's your first one to be able to convince someone to try it at all.
Yep.
So that's if you're buying an investment property. Additionally, if you're going to house hack, I look at it the same way. Let's say New Orleans, they've got literally you go to St. Charles, there's $2 to $4 million duplexes to fourplexes, beautiful houses. There's no way in hell that living in that the income on the other side is going to cover even a fraction of the note.
Yep. Yep.
But so that there's a spectrum there too. Like you could live in like the complete like a complete war zone where your note covers your duplex side covers the whole note, but your house is falling apart.
Yep.
Or you can go to more of like a luxury house hack where it like helps out cover the expenses, or even more extreme, it could help you live further outside of your means. you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but if something like that was to make you be able to live a lifestyle that is more comfortable for what you want, but then also get on your record rental income for tax purposes and for making you more bankable in the future, I can see living in a more luxurious house hack to get your family and immediate family and whoever else is involved in this with you. I can see that being a selling point. So some of the wealthier guys I know that would never house hack. I'm like, oh yeah, really? I can pull up like a house in the Garden District in New Orleans, and they're like, oh, that's a beautiful house. I'm like, that's a duplex. They're like, oh, I'm like, yeah. And since your family doesn't want to do this, imagine, hey, babe, we can't afford to live here, but we can afford to live there. And
Yeah.
then their financial situation might not change a whole lot, but they might be more bankable in a couple of years. And that rent on that side is probably going to go up. We're not going to assume that it will, but it's not as simple of an answer as this is a good deal. This is how the money is. There's emotional sides to it. There's how does it change your
Yeah. Yeah.
bankability?
Yeah.
There's how it changes your taxes. There's a lot of parts moving here that you really need to take into account to understand. Because you might do a couple of years in there, and then your wife go, this really isn't that complicated. And then the next deal you bring her, she's
Yep.
like, hey, look, babe, I really like how this one turned out. Let's look at more stuff. I'm starting to trust you. So you're building trust. It's almost like building your
Yep.
credit score with your inner circle.
Yep.
And
Yep. Makes sense.
yeah. So I think there's more to it than simply the numbers. The
Yep.
numbers are super important.
Yeah. You always start with the numbers. That's
Always
for
start with the
sure.
numbers, but there's more. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And there's also something else that I think would be the last thing we touch on. My first deal was a great deal, but you can also look for a bit more value add where you can make a great deal to a, I don't know, excellent deal. Is
yeah.
that better than great? Or you could turn a good deal into a great deal where a lot of other investors are not seeing the value there you can add. For example, in my first house hack, I'm adding square footage to the top floor. I'm adding square footage to the second floor. So the bottom floor, the second floor, and some square footage in the basement, which doesn't really matter because no one goes in the basement. Plus, I'm adding a bedroom to the bottom floor and another bathroom to the bottom floor. So this could be from a good deal. This could be an excellent or a great deal, depending on if you were able to see the
Yeah.
value in that or not. So
Yeah.
you can also approach it that way.
And on an appraisal basis, you become more bankable because on a ratio basis, your debt to equity ratio becomes healthier. So you're more bankable because you're adding value.
Yep, exactly.
There's that part in the background that's super important, especially when you first start. And most people, when they first start, are way more they're less healthily leveraged from a bank's perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I guess the lesson here is if you're a beginner, always go for the great deal first, whatever
Yeah.
great means to you, but start with the numbers, of
Yeah.
course, above average. And then after that, it depends a lot on, your approach and what you're going for. But you can also go for some excellent deals, which I guess I'm going to coin that here today. We're going to say good deals, great deals, and then excellent deals. So.
Sure. Yeah. Excellence where you're winning more than just financially, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, so that'll be it for this video. You guys give Ned from Ned Talks, give him a follow on his channel. He has some good content, and that'll be it. Thank you all for watching.
Appreciate it. Later.